Attending a wedding banquet in Jesus' day must have been really stressful. From the moment you walk in and take off your sandals, everyone sizes you up, even as you do the same with them. Let's see, where should I sit? Well, I'm better than he is, but he might have me beat, so I'd better sit in a lower spot than him. All this jockeying for position as you consider your own worth relative to those around you, all while trying to figure out what the host thinks of you. Meanwhile, as you stand there making your calculations, the other guests are rushing to claim the best spots. But once you have assessed your status level, you move to a spot at the table and you lie down. You see, at these banquets, as was the custom back then, the tables were low to the ground and arranged in a U-shaped formation. The servants would come in at the open end with food, while guests reclined around the outside on soft mats, resting on their left elbow and angling towards the table with their right hand to get food. Really uncomfortable. About the worst thing that can happen after you finally settle in for the meal is for the host to approach you in front of everyone and say, "Yeah, you're going to have to move." Suddenly realizing you've miscalculated the evening's pecking order, your face flushes red with humiliation and you scramble to sit and then stand up. You gather your robes about you and shuffle over to the lowest spot, the only one left. And even if you did deserve a higher place, it's too late, and you're so embarrassed. And the other guests are quiet, looking down at their pita bread, really glad it's not them. And you hear some smart aleck mutter, "Awkward," under his breath. The whole scenario could ruin your appetite. But Jesus offers us a simple solution in today's gospel reading. Sit at the lowest spot to begin with. Then when the host notices the absurdity of your placement, he will tap your foot and invite you higher up. At which point, you can spring up from your mat, gather your robes, and do a little strut to your new position. All the other guests look on in envy. Problem solved. Well, not quite. Because strangely enough, Jesus seems to be telling his listeners to act with humility, just so they can be rewarded with the honor of moving higher up at the table. That doesn't sound like something he would say. What we have to remember is the context of this parable. These wedding banquets had a formality to them that we don't completely understand today. What your host thought of you and of your relationship to him was embedded within the invitation to the banquet itself. The quality of the food served, your placement at the table, whether you accepted the invitation at all, because then it would mean you'd have to reciprocate with an invite to a banquet of your own of equal or greater value. Each aspect of the banquet served to cement or to weaken your affiliation with this person and his family. It was a delicate dance of manners and social cues which you had no choice but to follow. So when Jesus today asks the other guests to ignore tradition and practice real humility by putting themselves on the lowest spot at the table, he really means it. And it's actually a big request to make of them. He's not just offering a clever way to avoid sitting too high up and being told to move down. He's telling his listeners, disregard your reputation and your ranking in this community and humble yourself. And it's not an easy thing for them to do within this rigid structure. But Jesus invites them to reject the whole system of hierarchy and formality, this dance of manners, because only then will real relationship be possible. Then Jesus takes it a step further. He turns to his host and says, "For your next banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, because they can't repay you. Stop having parties whose purpose is to obligate others to invite you to their celebrations afterwards. Instead, be real, show you care, Feed those who cannot possibly scratch your back in return. Those same people, the crippled, the lame, the blind, weren't even allowed to worship at the temple or to partake at the sacrificial table. So in effect, Jesus is urging these Pharisees at this banquet to demonstrate to those outcasts that God really does care for them. He's inviting them to practice compassion. So that's what I think is going on in today's gospel reading. Not just fake humility, not just working the system, but an invitation to true relationship, to the compassion that blossoms when we throw off expectations of who is in and who is out, who is high or who is low in the pecking order. Now, it's tempting to disdain those Pharisees for their rigid system of table hierarchy. But the truth is, we practice exclusivity in our own lives. Pecking orders spring up wherever two or more are gathered in his name. In-groups form despite our best efforts. What a shame that is. Because I'll bet that most of you at some point in your life have felt like an outcast. So you know what it's like to be shunned. I've been noticing at our coffee hours how happy everyone is to be back. Together again, to see one another and reconnect, share stories, and to catch up on life. For too long, we have been separated. I've also noticed these past 2 Sundays, when I walk into the parish hall after this service, and after my 15 minutes of meet and greet at the church door after the service, I've noticed a few new visitors who have come 2 weeks in a row, sitting alone at their own table, while others congregate and chat away at a nearby table filled with regulars. And I'm reminded of that wonderful sentence in today's letter to the Hebrews. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels unawares. Nicholas Epley is a behavioral scientist at the University of Chicago, and he noticed one day on his daily office commute that absolutely no one was engaged in conversation on his train. On their phones, or nose in a book, or eyes closed, no one was connecting. So like any good behavioral scientist would do, he conducted a survey. And he discovered that one reason people are reluctant to talk to strangers on a train is that they don't think it'll be enjoyable. Others worry that they themselves will be uninteresting, that the whole encounter will be awkward, or they'll somehow regret it. So why bother? Epley then conducted research that entailed sending people out to trains to deliberately speak with someone. And you know what? They really enjoyed it. Most of them underestimated how positively people would respond to a show of support. And they didn't realize how much they themselves would learn from the interaction. For most of them, it truly turned out to be the case that they were entertaining angels on those trains, without knowing that's whom they would encounter. So I would encourage you to try doing that in your life here and there, and especially at coffee hour or other church functions, because that's how we get more people to feel like they belong here, by treating them like they do. So what Jesus tells us this morning might be as hard for us to hear as it was for his original audience. Forget your status, your perceived reputation, your place in the in crowd at the in table. Break down all the barriers that you erect between yourself and other people. Humble yourself. Remember how hard it was for you when you were outcast. Then cast out no one. Those newcomers sitting alone for those 2 Sundays in a row are just as precious to God as each person at the lively table. Try sitting with them, not out of pity or in the hope of some reward. Do it because you never know when you might be entertaining angels unawares. Do it because you might be an angel called to entertain. Encountering new people could open up your life, creating a space for grace to enter more fully. And if you ever walk into a room, wedding banquet or not, and wonder where you belong, It's at the table next to someone you don't know. When we create a sense of inclusive hospitality, we rehearse for the heavenly banquet here on earth. A feast where no one is misplaced and every seat is a place of honor.